Texas, February 1947. The barbed wire had gone slack long ago. Rust streaked the fence posts, mesquite vines twisted through the coils, and the old guard tower leaned just enough to look like it was bowing to time. Camp Wallace had once held 2,000 German and Japanese prisoners, the wind carrying foreign songs through the Texas plains. Now it was silent, except for the clatter of loose tin roofing and the moan of wind across the empty barracks. On the edge of the property, a battered army jeep stopped in a swirl of red dust. Out stepped Captain Samuel Carter, U.S. Army Medical Corps, retired. His coat hung open in the morning wind, his boots crunching across gravel that still remembered boots before his. "Hard to believe it was only 2 years ago," he murmured. Beside him climbed out Nurse Evelyn Ward, a woman of 40 with steel-gray eyes, and the kind of calm that came from seeing too much and still choosing kindness. Her uniform was gone, replaced by a faded blue dress and sensible shoes. She carried a satchel of papers, and somewhere inside it was the reason they'd come. "You sure this is the right place, Sam?" she asked. He nodded. "Camp Wallace, closed October 45. The county's deciding whether to bulldoze it or sell it for scrap." Evelyn looked at the sun-bleached sign near the gate. U.S. Army Prisoner of War Camp, 234. Wallace. Someone had painted a cross over the number, as if even the land had earned absolution. "Feels strange," she said softly. "Walking into a place built for suffering." Carter adjusted his hat. "Then maybe it's time we build something better." The main gate hung crooked, one hinge missing. They pushed through and stepped onto the gravel road. The barracks lined both sides like skeleton ribs, doors flapping in the wind. "This is where they kept the workshops," Carter said, pointing to a row of low buildings. "Some of the prisoners were carpenters, made furniture for the locals when the war ended." Evelyn ran her hand over a doorframe, feeling the rough pine beneath her fingers. Imagine that. Kindness built with borrowed hammers. They moved toward what had once been the infirmary, a long white building half collapsed on one side. The sign above the door still read "Sick Bay," the letters ghostly under the dust. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of rust and medicine long gone. Sunlight cut through broken panes, illuminating rows of empty cots. On one of them lay a small wooden box. Evelyn lifted it carefully. Inside were handmade medical instruments, scalpels carved from scrap metal, a stethoscope cobbled from tin and rubber hose. Each piece had been cleaned and wrapped in linen, as if waiting for hands that would never return. Carter whistled softly. "They made these here?" "Looks like it," Evelyn said. Someone cared enough to keep them safe. At the bottom of the box lay a folded note, the ink faded but legible. She read aloud. "For whoever finds this place, remember that healing lived here too. Dr. M. Sato, Camp Wallace, 1945." Evelyn's eyes filled. "A Japanese doctor." Carter took the note, reading it again. "They must have treated each other here. Maybe even our men. The army never mentioned it." He looked around the room. The empty cots, the broken windows, the ghosts of mercy. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "what if we didn't let this place die?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "What if we rebuilt it? Not as a prison, as a hospital." Evelyn blinked. "A hospital here? Why not?" he said. "The buildings are still sound. There's a water tower, a generator, even the mess hall. We could turn it into a rehabilitation center. For veterans, refugees, anyone still limping from this war." Evelyn stared at him, then looked around again. In the quiet, she could almost hear the echo of footsteps, the soft murmur of languages, the clang of work that had ended too soon. She said, almost to herself, "If mercy could survive wire, maybe it can survive peace." Carter smiled faintly. "Then we start here." By afternoon, the county surveyor's truck pulled up. A man in suspenders stepped out, carrying a clipboard. "You folks the ones from the church committee?" Evelyn nodded. "We represent the Larkspur Relief Society." "Well, ma'am, I'll be honest. The county's been trying to sell this land for months. Some folks say tear it down, others say it's cursed." "Cursed?" she repeated. The man shrugged. "Bad memories. Barbed wire don't make good foundations." Carter stepped forward. "Then we'll build something that makes people forget the wire." The surveyor eyed them, then chuckled. "You two sound like preachers." "Just tired soldiers," Carter said, "trying to finish what the war couldn't." 2 weeks later, the first volunteers arrived. Farmers, veterans, local churchgoers, even a few former guards from the camp. They came in old trucks and wagons, carrying hammers, paint, and hope. Carter stood on the steps of the main hall, unrolling a blueprint. "All right, folks. This barracks row will be the patient wards. The mess hall becomes a dining area. The chapel stays a chapel. And that infirmary, that's our heart. A man in overalls raised his hand. You really think people will come here? After what it was? Carter nodded. They will, because everyone's looking for a place to heal. And this one's already practiced. Evelyn smiled at that. The land remembers mercy, she added. The work was slow, but the rhythm felt right. Men tore down the rusted fences, stacking the barbed wire into neat coils. Women scrubbed the barracks with lye soap until the wood shone again. Children from nearby farms painted signs in red and white. Larkspur Rehabilitation Center. Open soon. One afternoon, while clearing the infirmary yard, a boy uncovered something buried beneath a patch of wildflowers, a wooden cross, its arms bound with copper wire. Evelyn brushed the dirt away and found faint carved letters, Für alle, die heilten. She looked to Carter. Do you know what it means? He thought for a moment. German. For all who healed. Evelyn held the cross against her chest. Then we're in the right place. By March, the first patients arrived. American veterans with leg braces and burned lungs from the Pacific. Then came 2 widows from Houston, then a Polish immigrant family traveling west. Evelyn organized the wards. Carter oversaw the operations, and the townspeople watched, unsure what to make of it all. Some whispered that it was disrespectful to the men who died in the war. Others said it was foolish to let enemy ground hold Americans again. Carter answered every critic the same way. This ground held pain once. It can hold peace now. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the camp gold, Evelyn stood by the chapel door. Inside, a few volunteers were sanding pews left behind by the German prisoners. The faint smell of pine filled the air. She looked up at the small stained glass window above the altar. It showed a hand reaching down toward another hand rising upward. The glass was cracked, but the light still found its way through. Sam, she said softly, do you ever think they meant for this to happen? He joined her at the doorway, wiping sawdust from his hands. Who? The men who built this chapel. The ones we called enemies. Carter looked at the window, then back at her. Maybe mercy always plants seeds in enemy soil. It just takes time for them to grow. That night, as the lanterns flickered in the barracks, the wind carried faint music, someone playing an old harmonica near the watchtower. The sound drifted through the camp like a heartbeat restarting after too long a silence. Evelyn lay awake in her cot, listening. She thought of the note left by Dr. Sato. Remember that healing lived here too. In the dark, she whispered to the ceiling, we're remembering. And outside, the camp that had once been built for confinement began to breathe again. The sound of saws, laughter, prayers, and second chances echoing beneath a Texas sky wide enough to forgive anything. By April, the wind in Camp Wallace no longer sounded hollow. It carried hammers striking nails, saws cutting through new pine, and laughter echoing between freshly painted walls. The name had already changed on the gate, Larkspur Rehabilitation Center, painted in blue letters by a boy who used to deliver milk to the old guards. Every morning, volunteers lined up at the old parade ground, where Captain Samuel Carter kept his clipboard and his faith. He divided tasks like he once assigned missions, deliberate, fair, and never above getting his own hands dirty. Barrack 6 becomes the therapy ward, he called. We'll need sunlight and open windows. Let's make this a place where air feels free. At the far end of the field, Evelyn Ward supervised the women's team. Nurses, widows, church volunteers, scrubbing and painting what used to be the canteen. Her sleeves were rolled up, her hair tied in a red scarf. A photographer from the Houston Chronicle arrived one morning, notebook in hand. They say you're building a hospital on enemy ground, he said, half skeptical, half curious. Evelyn smiled. No, sir. We're building peace on it. By mid-May, the first real test came. A convoy from Galveston arrived carrying 6 wounded veterans from a nearby naval hospital whose wing had collapsed in a storm. One of them, a pilot named Don Price, still had shrapnel in his leg from Okinawa. When he learned where he'd been brought, he scowled. You're telling me I'm sleeping in a prison camp? He snapped. Carter sat by his bedside. You're sleeping in a place that's been rebuilt by the same kind of men who once lived here, and by women who decided mercy outranks memory. Price looked away. You think painting over barbed wire changes what it was? Carter's voice softened. No, but it changes what it becomes. That evening, a truck pulled up from Houston with a surprise cargo. 6 former German POWs who had chosen to remain in Texas after the war. They'd volunteered through the Red Cross, bringing carpentry tools and lumber. The leader, Matthias Becker, stepped down first, cap in hand. Captain Carter, he said in careful English, we heard you needed builders. For a long moment, the two men just looked at each other across the dust. Around them, the volunteers froze. A few of the veterans stiffened, their hands twitching at memories. Finally, Carter nodded. "We do, but we're not building fences anymore." Matthias smiled faintly. "That is good. We are tired of fences." The integration wasn't easy. For weeks, tension hummed beneath every shared meal and work shift. Some of the locals wouldn't talk to the Germans at all. Others spoke too sharply, as if testing whether forgiveness had a breaking point. One afternoon, while repairing the roof of the chapel, a ladder slipped. Matthias fell 10 feet, hitting the ground hard. Dust rose, people shouted. Don Price, the skeptical pilot, ran forward and knelt beside him without thinking. "Easy," he said. "Don't move your leg." Matthias winced, blood on his temple. "Not broken," he muttered. "Maybe not," Price said, checking his pulse. "But you're bleeding bad." Evelyn arrived with a first aid kit. As she worked, she noticed the look on Don's face. Fear, guilt, something older. When Matthias was carried inside, Price followed, silent. That night, he sat outside the infirmary long after lights out. When Carter came by, he said quietly, "He could have died. And all I saw was a man falling, not a uniform." Carter nodded. "That's the sound of hate wearing off." A week later, Matthias hobbled back into the yard on crutches. Everyone stopped what they were doing. He raised one hand and said, "I am not very good at staying down." Laughter broke the tension. From then on, the line between them and us blurred, until no one could tell who was who. The former prisoners taught the veterans how to build ramps for wheelchairs. The veterans taught the Germans how to mix Texas mortar so it didn't crack in heat. Together they rewired the chapel lights, rebuilt the kitchen, and planted a garden behind the infirmary. Okra, tomatoes, and a row of bluebonnets Evelyn insisted on. By June, the camp looked nothing like a prison. The guard towers were gone, replaced by water tanks and a bell tower. The barracks roofs shone new and bright. Birds nested where spotlights used to be. A visiting reporter asked Carter, "What's the hardest part of rebuilding?" He answered, "Convincing people that forgiveness has blueprints." Then came the summer heat and a crisis that tested everything. One morning, Evelyn found a fevered child on the porch, a Mexican laborer's son who'd wandered in from the road, coughing violently. Carter examined him and frowned. Pneumonia, severe. The town physician refused to admit the boy to his clinic. "He's not one of ours," he said. So Carter carried the boy himself into the old infirmary. The nurses hesitated. "Doctor, we don't even know what he's carrying." "Then we'll find out," Carter said. For 2 days, the boy lay delirious, his breathing shallow. Carter barely left his side. Matthias and Evelyn kept cool cloths on his forehead, and Don Price worked the pump that powered the improvised oxygen line. On the 3rd night, the fever broke. When the child finally opened his eyes, Evelyn whispered, "Welcome back, sweetheart." Carter turned to Matthias and nodded. Add one more miracle to this place. But outside the gates, rumors spread. People said the camp hospital was harboring disease, taking in foreigners, erasing the war's memory. A small crowd gathered with placards. "No enemy grounds in Texas." Carter faced them from the steps. "You want to know what's happening in there?" He called out. "We're doing what we fought a war to defend, the right to be human." A voice shouted back, "And what about our dead?" He looked straight into the crowd. "We honor them by proving they didn't die for vengeance. They died for mercy." The protest quieted. A few people lowered their signs. By nightfall, the crowd had gone home. The following week, a letter arrived from the Dallas Morning News. The journalist who'd visited earlier had written an editorial titled "The Camp That Chose Compassion." It spread quickly. Donations arrived, beds, bandages, books. A church choir sent hymnals. Even a senator wrote a note praising the citizens of Larkspur who are teaching America what victory truly means. Evelyn pinned the article on the infirmary wall beneath Dr. Sato's old note. The two papers fluttered side by side, words from opposite nations sharing one wind. On Sundays, the chapel filled. Veterans sat beside their former guards, wives beside widows. Children on laps once meant to hold rifles. The first sermon Carter gave wasn't about heaven or victory. It was about mending. "We can't undo what was done here," he said, "but we can decide what this ground stands for now. It used to separate people. Today it gathers them." Afterward, Matthias approached him with a folded piece of wood, a scrap from the old barracks wall. "From the first building we took down," he said. "For your desk." Carter turned it over. On the back, carved carefully, were the words, "Highlandist Frieden." "Healing is peace," he smiled. "Then peace it is." By August, the Larkspur Rehabilitation Center was running full-time. They treated veterans, farmers, children, immigrants, anyone who walked through the gate. The old camp had become a refuge, its gravel paths lined with flowering vines. At night, when the wind blew across the open field, the sound of rusted barbed wire was gone. In its place was the rustle of leaves and the quiet breathing of men and women who finally rested easy. October 1947. Larkspur, Texas. The Texas wind had changed. Where once it howled through empty watchtowers, now it carried the hum of an alive place. Laughter in the courtyard, the clink of dishes from the new dining hall, the steady rhythm of a piano someone had donated from Houston. A sign now hung over the front gate, its letters burned carefully into cedar. Larkspur Center for Rehabilitation and Peace. The word camp was gone. Every Sunday afternoon, visitors arrived, some curious, some skeptical, all surprised. They came expecting ruins or penitence. They found instead a garden where the parade ground had been, rows of bluebonnets edging paths once lined with fences. Inside, veterans practiced walking again with the help of crutches built by former German carpenters. A Japanese orderly handed out lunch trays. Local women read to patients on the porch. The place breathed like a body learning to trust its own heart. One morning, Captain Samuel Carter sat in what had once been the commandant's office, now bright with light and the smell of lemon oil. A letter lay open on his desk. The seal read, "The Red Cross International Committee." He called out, "Evelyn, you'll want to see this." She entered, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's that?" He handed her the letter. "To the directors of Larkspur Center, Texas. News of your work has reached Geneva. We would like permission to send correspondents and medical observers to document your transformation of Camp Wallace into a civilian hospital. The world needs examples of mercy that last longer than war." Evelyn looked up slowly. "The world," she repeated. They noticed. Carter smiled faintly. "Seems we've gone international." A month later, reporters arrived in dusty cars, notebooks at the ready. A photographer from Life magazine walked the grounds, taking pictures of patients playing checkers under the pecan trees. He asked Evelyn, "Is it true some of your staff were once prisoners here?" She nodded. "Yes, they've been free twice, once by armistice and once by forgiveness." The man blinked, then jotted the quote. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Matthias Becker, the German carpenter who had once fallen from the chapel roof, stood beside the new bell tower, sanding the final railing. A flashbulb popped. The next month, that photograph appeared on the cover of Life magazine under the headline, "From Barbed Wire to Healing Hands, the Texas Miracle of 1947. Within weeks, letters began arriving from across the world. One came from Japan, to the people of Larkspur. My father was in Camp Wallace. He wrote to us that Americans treated him with kindness. When we saw your story, we understood his peace. You have shown that mercy is stronger than memory. S. Nakamura, Kyoto, Japan. Another from Germany. Captain Carter and Miss Ward. My brother died in the war, but knowing that some of his comrades found healing in your hands has softened my grief. Please accept these seeds of Edelweiss. They grow where forgiveness is real." Evelyn kept every letter, pressing the flowers between them until the stack filled a wooden box. She placed it beside Dr. Sato's note and whispered, "You were right. Healing lived here too." By Christmas 1947, the center had become a pilgrimage site. Church choirs visited from Dallas and San Antonio. Schools brought students to learn how peace is built. A state senator called it the moral heart of Texas. But Carter resisted turning it into a spectacle. "This isn't a monument," he told the reporters. "It's a reminder. Mercy only works when it's in motion." He was right. The motion never stopped. When polio struck nearby counties the next spring, Larkspur's staff built iron lungs out of spare tractor parts. When a drought hit, they converted old water tanks into reservoirs for the community. The world came to call it the camp that chose compassion. May 1948, the dedication ceremony. A clear sky spread over the fields. Rows of chairs filled the courtyard, and flags from 4 nations hung above the podium: the United States, Germany, Japan, and the Red Cross emblem of neutrality. Carter adjusted his tie and looked out over the crowd. Former guards sat beside former prisoners. Children born after the war perched on their parents' knees. The smell of barbecue mingled with the faint scent of disinfectant and fresh paint. When the band quieted, Carter stepped to the microphone. His voice, though weathered, carried strong. 2 years ago, this was a place the world wanted to forget. We didn't tear it down. We rebuilt it, not to honor the war, but to finish what peace began. He gestured toward the chapel. "Some of the men here fought each other once. Now they fix roofs together. That's what victory is supposed to look like." Applause rippled through the crowd. Evelyn stepped forward next, reading aloud from one of the letters they'd received. Dr. Sato's last recorded words before his repatriation. "If ever you build hospitals where camps once stood, remember the patients you never met. They prayed for you too." Her voice caught slightly at the end. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of awe. Then, together, they unveiled the plaque on the chapel wall, dedicated to the memory of all who chose healing over hate. 1947. The crowd stood. Some wept. And when the bell tower rang for the first time, its sound carried across the fields and into town. Not the metallic alarm of a guard's bell, but a slow, rich tone that felt like a heartbeat rediscovered. Years later, 1963, the war was 2 decades gone. The hospital had expanded, its original barracks replaced with new wings and paved paths. The front gate still bore the same words: Larkspur Center for Rehabilitation and Peace. Visitors from universities came now, students of medicine and theology eager to walk the grounds where reconciliation had taken root. Inside the small museum built beside the chapel, a glass case displayed 3 artifacts: Dr. Sato's handmade medical tools, Matthias Becker's carved cross, "For all who healed," and the note Evelyn had written on the day the protests stopped: "Mercy has no borders." Children on field trips pressed their faces to the glass. Teachers told them this was once a prison camp. The children always looked confused. A camp for who? And someone would answer, "For everyone once," until people decided that healing was stronger. Autumn 1970, the reunion on the 25th anniversary of the camp's closure. The surviving founders returned. Carter, now gray and walking with a cane, stepped from his car and stopped before the gate. The cedar sign was the same, only weathered smoother by time. Evelyn waited beside the chapel steps, her hair white as cotton, her smile still young. "You came back," she said. "Didn't I promise to?" he replied. They walked slowly toward the garden where bluebonnets still bloomed. Matthias Becker's grandson, visiting from Bremen, handed Carter a small envelope. Inside was a photograph of Matthias in 1948, standing before the bell tower, his hands stained with paint. On the back, written in careful script, "For all who chose to build again." Carter nodded, his eyes wet. He would have liked this place now. "He built it that way," Evelyn said. They sat together on a bench, the sun warming their hands. Around them, the hospital hummed. Wheelchairs rolling, laughter echoing down halls, the bell tolling noon. "I used to think we rebuilt a camp," Carter said quietly. "But maybe it rebuilt us," Evelyn smiled. "It still is." Epilogue, the place that healed the world decades later. When historians wrote about post-war reconciliation, they always returned to the same story: how an abandoned Texas POW camp became a sanctuary of healing. The old photographs showed sunlight pouring through the chapel's cracked glass, hands of every color and language working side by side. Visitors still walk those grounds today. They touch the wooden cross, they read Dr. Sato's note, they stand in silence when the bell rings. And if you listen closely, you can hear what the wind says when it moves through the mesquite and magnolia. It says that mercy is louder than war. It says that healing remembers longer than hate. It says that once, in 1947, a few ordinary Texans took a place built to divide the world and turned it into proof that the human heart can rebuild anything.